All right, so I want to talk a little bit about agriculture and technology. As Mike introduced earlier, it's hard to be a farmer. It's hard to plant your crops. It's hard to dig the soil. It's hard to get your seeds in there. It's hard to harvest the crops that you're putting out there. And therefore, from time immemorial, from as long as people have been practicing agriculture, technology has been one of those ways in which we've made agriculture a bit easier. Going back as early as Egyptian times, Roman times, we see technologies being used, ways of moving water from rivers into irrigation canals, the use of animals or simple harvesting implements to actually sow the seeds in the ground, harvest the crops. This tended to be on a very small scale, relatively low mechanization. The technology was relatively simple and didn't really rely on a lot of inputs. Here, even just about 100 years ago, you can see the kind of technology that we're talking about in agriculture in the US. Horse-drawn plows to turn the soil so that you can get the seeds in there. Things have really changed today. Mechanization, agrochemicals, technologies, genetic, informational, have completely revolutionized the way we do agriculture today compared to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution when things really started to change. Let me just give you an example of what this looks like. This is one of hundreds of examples of technology coming to bear on the agricultural system in modern agriculture.
Introducing the EcoAg Harvester from EcoPower Systems. This all-season, all-weather harvester outperforms other harvesting methods by delivering cleaner produce faster and safer, even in the wettest fields where other equipment can't work. From Yuma to Salinas, in celery fields, the EcoAg Harvester is helping crews throughout California to produce 3,000 to 4,000 cartons of celery a day. And with only a 1-hour cleanup time, it's making everyone's job easier. So how does this harvester do it? Well, the EcoAg...
How does this harvester do it? Well, you can go check out the full video on the link that we have on our site. But check this out. People, hundreds of acres getting harvested, people smiling, process is efficient. What can be wrong with this? Absolutely amazing. In addition to mechanization, some of the other trends in technologies that have really contributed to agriculture include, first and foremost, the development of inorganic fertilizers. One of the key limiting factors in limiting the production of agricultural products, plants in particular, is the limitation of nutrients. Nitrogen in particular, phosphorus, potassium, those are kind of the big three. The process of most of the nitrogen that exists in our biosphere actually occurs in the atmosphere as nitrogen gas. Fritz Haber, at the beginning of the 20th century, developed a process whereby he was able to take nitrogen gas and actually convert it into a form that was accessible and usable by plants into an inorganic form that could be absorbed by plants. This completely revolutionized agriculture by overcoming one of the key limitations of production, and that is nitrogen limitation. One of the other important contributions that happened technology-wise was the development of inorganic compounds for the combating of pests. After World War II, or actually during the development of World War II, the chemical industries in Germany in particular were developing chemicals that could be used for warfare purposes. So things like organophosphates were actually a byproduct of Nazi research that was being used to develop better nerve agents in the use of wartime, including in gas chambers in concentration camps. After the war, also during the war, was the development of other compounds like organochlorine compounds that were used to control insects that were transmitting pathogens to humans, particularly in the tropical areas where the war was being fought. They were used against lice, against mosquitoes, for combating things like malaria, and dengue, and yellow fever. After the war, these compounds were turned towards insects and other pests within agricultural systems, thereby reducing another potential limitation on productivity, and that is the action of insect pests on agricultural products. The availability of these key chemicals like nitrogen as a key nutrient and like insecticides as a way to overcome herbivory, and you combine them with breeding for plants that were actually able to take advantage of that rapid growth, what you had was a confluence of factors that brought about what we are often referred to right now as the Green Revolution, a post-war era where plant breeding combined with agrochemicals actually increased plant production and agricultural yields to levels that had never really been seen before. These little stunted plants that you see on the side over here actually are examples of varieties that are high yielding. You can see all those little flowering areas on the top of rice here in this particular case, but that are short that could take advantage of these rapid areas in growth. And again, mixed with insecticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and also with irrigation technologies, basically is a way to overcome those limitations on plant production. These are key technologies that have really only been developed in the last 30, 40 years that have significantly contributed to agricultural productivity. When you add new developments to this, including what some people refer to as the genetic revolution, the molecularization of agriculture, the using and finding of traits in other organisms and putting them into agricultural plants and putting them into crops, such as this transformed corn that you see over here on the side that is now resistant to certain insects because of the inclusion of a gene that comes from a soil bacterium. Agricultural production can also increase there. There are many examples of this that we're going to talk about throughout the course. Some of these traits are not just about overcoming limitations or overcoming pests. They also include the inclusion of traits that we might want in there, like enhanced nutrients or vitamins in the plants, so that we can overcome some nutritional deficiencies that people often experience. Now, this obviously trades off with some of our unease with the use of these genetic technologies for food production. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Another form of technology that we're seeing more and more these days is actually what some people refer to as the data revolution, bringing drones, sensors, robots, precision technologies to agriculture. This is really about collecting hordes of data, understanding through computer algorithms where particular problems with agriculture may lie, perhaps identifying spots in your fields where plants might be nitrogen deficient, only adding nitrogen in those areas, perhaps looking at the spectral characteristics of the leaves to see where there might be damage from herbivores, spraying insecticides only in those areas. All of this enabled by the collection of huge amounts of data from these cheap sensors, collection of these data brought together, analyzed by large companies generally, and then made available as services that become part of the suite of tools within the tractors themselves, as you can see here in this depiction here of what the cockpit looks like in a modern plant combine. All of these technologies really remove the eyes of people from the ground more and more and allow computers, sensors to actually do the observations and in some ways remove people from the decision making as well. So we can ask ourselves, with all of these technological advancements that have happened, there clearly have been incredible advantages to agriculture, primarily in terms of productivity. But we have to ask also ourselves, what sorts of problems have we created in bringing these technologies to agriculture? Have we actually created more problems than we have solved? Is adding all of that nitrogen to our agricultural systems, what are the impacts of that on the environment? Where does that nitrogen go when it leaves when it leaves our fields? What happens when it enters our waterways and it enters our drinking water? But who controls these technologies? Who develops them? How do you actually gain access to them? Does everybody benefit from them equally? What has this actually done to the livelihoods of people involved in agriculture and the well-being of those people? Has it actually made their lives better? Who actually benefits from these technologies? Who actually pays for them? Is it us as consumers? Is it the farmers that pay for them? Is it the corporations and the companies who actually control the technologies that are actually sold into the marketplace? All of these dimensions really bear on the question of, how does technology actually benefit agriculture? How does it actually benefit people that are involved in agriculture? And as you will learn throughout this class, there's no simple answer to this. Whether you look at it from the perspective of economics or the environment or the people actually involved in agriculture, you're going to gain very different perspectives on the value of something like technology in agriculture.